Hello, all you freedom-loving people. President Trump is planning for paper ballots, and he's calling on Big Pharma to justify their claims for COVID vaccines. Space Command is moving to Alabama, and let's analyze why supporting Intel is a strong move. Okay, let's get into it. Today, President Trump announced that Space Command is moving to Alabama from Colorado.
The U.S. Space Command headquarters will move to the beautiful locale of a place called Huntsville, Alabama, forever to be known from this point forward as Rocket City. Okay, so Huntsville, Alabama, we love Alabama. I only won it by about 47 points. I don't think that influenced my decision, though, right? That didn't, right? But we had a lot of competition for this, and Alabama's getting it, Huntsville in particular. So congratulations, everybody. Katie, congratulations. This will result in more than 30,000 Alabama jobs and probably much more than that, and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and that's billions because it can't be millions, it's billions and billions of dollars. Most importantly, this decision will help America defend and dominate the high frontier, as they call it. I want to thank Secretary Pete Hegseth. He's doing a fantastic job. And Secretary of the Air Force Troy Mink. Troy, thank you very much.
During the meeting at the Oval Office, President Trump stuck to routine and he answered a few questions. Answering a question about the National Guard deployment to Chicago, President Trump said, "We're going in."
We're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it because I have an obligation to protect this country. And that includes Baltimore. I saw where Governor Moore was asking me to take a walk down the street of Baltimore. Well, Baltimore is a very unsafe place. It's rated number 4 in the city, one of the most unsafe places anywhere in the world. But, you know, we took care. This was a beautiful thing that happened in Washington because we showed that it could be done. And this wasn't just sending big, strong guys, and they are big and they are strong. You know, we had a great decision from the Supreme Court that had to do with sort of talent. It had to do with you are put down based on merit. You can hire based on merit. So merit for a soldier or for a policeman is strong, physically fit, having a certain ability, not a person that is woke and got the job through woke, but wasn't strong enough to lift a gun out of the holster, et cetera, et cetera. I'm very proud of Washington. It serves as a template, and we're going to do it elsewhere. But Chicago is certainly going to be high. I would love to have him call. I would love the governor of Illinois. I'd be honored to take his call. All he has to do is say, "Sir, we need help. It's out of control." And everyone knows it is. He's not kidding anyone. I would love to have, I would say, Governor Moore call, because I watched him over the weekend trying to explain that Baltimore, what they need is housing. No, they don't need housing. They need to get rid of the criminals. These are hardcore criminals. You know, we took many people off the streets of Washington, D.C. They're hardcore. They're not going to be good. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 2 years, they're going to be criminals. They were born to be criminals, frankly. They were born to be criminals, and they're tough and mean, and they'll cut your throat, and they won't even think about it the next day. They won't even remember that they did it. And we're not going to have those people. Washington, D.C. is now a safe zone. It's a safe place. And you can walk, Katie, you can walk right down the street.
President Trump also announced that the military shot out a drug-carrying boat from Venezuela on its way to America.
When you come out and when you leave the room, you'll see that we just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. And you'll be seeing that, and you'll be reading about that. It just happened moments ago, and our great general, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's been so incredible, including what took place in Iran, knocking out potential nuclear power for a long time to come. I think within a month they would have had it. We didn't do what we did. But he gave us a little bit of a briefing. And you'll see. And there's more where that came from. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And we just, these came out of Venezuela and coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela. So We took it out, and you'll get to see that after this meeting is over.
President Trump also reacted to the viral news over the weekend, claiming that he had died.
And they got it. Peter?
President Trump, something completely different, but about a big viral social media trend over the weekend. How did you find out over the weekend that you were dead? You see that?
No.
People didn't see it for a couple days. 1.3 million user engagements as of Saturday morning about your demise.
Really? I
didn't see that?
You know, I have heard, it's sort of crazy, but last week I did numerous news conferences, all successful. They went very well, like this is going very well. And then I didn't do any for 2 days, and they said, there must be something wrong with him. No, I heard that. I get reports. Now, you knew I did an interview that lasted for about an hour and a half with somebody, and everybody saw that was on one of your competitors. I did numerous shows and also did a number of truths, long truths, I think pretty poignant truths. No, I was very active over the weekend. They also knew I went out to visit some people at the club that I own, pretty nearby on the Potomac River. And no, I've been very active actually over the weekend. I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious stuff.
I'm glad it's
Well, it's fake news. You know, it's just it's so fake. That's why the media has so little credibility. I knew they were saying, like, is he okay? How's he feeling? What's wrong? I said, I just left. And it's also sort of a longer weekend, you know, it's Labor Day weekend. So I would say a lot of people know I was very active this Labor Day.
Today, a federal judge in California ruled that the Trump administration unlawfully used Marines and National Guard troops in Los Angeles. U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer said that the Trump administration violated the Posse Comitatus Act, which limits the power of the federal government to use military force in domestic matters. For now, 300 of the National Guard have remained in L.A., but for now, the troops are prohibited from engaging in arrests, apprehensions, searches and seizures, and other such activity. The ruling is on hold until September 12th. The Trump administration will likely appeal against the ruling. And during the meeting, President Trump reacted to a question about the ruling.
Very importantly, what did you not tell me in that question or statement that you made pretty much of a statement, I think?
Well, I was asking for the response.
No, you didn't say what the judge said, though. The judge said, but you can leave the 300 people that you already have in place. They can continue to be in place. That's all we need. But why didn't you put that as part of your statement? Because the same judge ruled exactly as you said, except the judge said that you can leave the 300 people that you already have in place. They can stay, they can remain, they can do what they have to do. Thank you very much, everybody.
Over the weekend, President Trump said he plans to sign an executive order that aims at requiring voter ID in elections across the country. President Trump made the statement on Truth Social, saying that he's also seeking other reforms to how elections take place. In his post, President Trump wrote, "Voter ID must be part of every single vote, no exceptions. I will be doing an executive order to that end. Also, no mail-in voting, except for those that are very ill and the faraway military. Use paper ballots only." On Sunday, Fox News reported that President Trump previously attempted to impose voter ID via an executive order earlier this year, but in April, U.S. District Judge Colleen Collar-Caudill in Washington, D.C. struck down parts of the order that were related to voter ID requirements. So we'll have to wait and see what the Trump administration does next. Yesterday, President Trump said that pharmaceutical companies, including Pfizer, should make public information that they've shared with him about their COVID-19 products. President Trump said in a post on Truth Social, "It's very important that the drug companies justify the success of their various COVID drugs. Many people think they are a miracle that save millions of lives. Others disagree, with CDC being ripped apart over this question. I want the answer, and I want it now." President Trump also said that Pfizer and other companies have shown him information that is extraordinary, but they never seem to show those results to the public. President Trump stated that the lack of public information was tied to turmoil at the CDC, where he just fired the director. President Trump said that he wanted companies to show the information now to CDC and the public and clear up this mess one way or the other. President Trump also emphasized that he wants transparency on the effectiveness of Operation Warp Speed. Operation Warp Speed was the initiative to produce vaccines to combat the pandemic in his first term. President Trump wrote, "I hope Operation Warp Speed was as brilliant as many say it was. If not, we all want to know about it and why. Thank you for your attention to this very important matter." According to a new report from the Treasury Department, Chinese networks are laundering billions of dollars in drug cartel cash through the U.S. financial system. The report revealed that banks flagged about $312 billion in transactions from suspected Chinese money laundering networks from January 2020 to December 2024. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network of the Treasury reported that banks flagged $312 billion in suspicious Chinese money laundering transactions from 2020 through 2024. The Treasury also linked Chinese money laundering networks to U.S. real estate transactions, casinos, human trafficking, and even laundering through assisted living homes in New York. The networks also used Chinese students who were studying in the U.S. to facilitate some schemes. Real estate was 13% of the total, but most flagged transactions came from U.S. banks. John Hurley, the Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, said money laundering networks linked to individual passport holders from the People's Republic of China enable cartels to poison Americans with fentanyl, conduct human trafficking, and wreak havoc among communities across our great nation. The report was released after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent suspended a Biden administration rule in March that was meant to fight money laundering. The report noted that laws and regulations in Mexico and China also play a role. According to the report, Mexico's currency restrictions prevent large amounts of U.S. dollars from being deposited into Mexican financial institutions, hindering the cartel's ability to launder funds through the formal Mexican financial system. And based on the report, Chinese currency laws limit how much money its citizens can send overseas each year. And the Mexican cartels and the Chinese money laundering networks have used these opportunities and have learned to work well together in recent years. The report explained that the Chinese demand for U.S. dollars and the cartel's need to clean illicit money have formed a win-win partnership for them. Cartels sell dirty dollars to Chinese money laundering networks, and then the Chinese money laundering networks pass the dollars on to their citizens. Scott Graytack, an anti-corruption attorney and the Deputy Executive Director for Transparency International U.S., said that the U.S. is considered one of the best places in the world for money laundering because of its strong property rights and rule of law. Graytack said, even though they don't like the rule of law, they certainly like their money being protected by it. So we just tend to attract a ton of dirty money. Graytack said that U.S. law enforcement officials can't track the money without stricter financial, business, and real estate reporting. The report also highlighted capital flight restrictions in China. These restrictions limit citizens to sending just $50,000 abroad each year for investment in finance. So that limit has developed its own underground banking network. The report stated that many Chinese citizens have turned to alternative methods like the Chinese underground banking system to bypass these restrictions. The Chinese underground banking system consists of various individuals and businesses from different industries who collaborate through mirror transfers to move money across borders as part of informal value transfer system schemes. The Chinese underground banking system, in turn, depends on Chinese money laundering networks to secure foreign currency. Yesterday, the leaders of many countries, including Russia and India, attended the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO summit in China. Chinese officials said that the recent summit was the largest since the organization began, with 26 countries taking part. The organization now includes 10 full members and 2 observers, with the combined economy nearing $30 trillion US. Just before the summit, Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping met the leader of Armenia and Azerbaijan and showed support for the 2 nations joining the summit. So what happened at the SCO summit? During the meeting, Xi Jinping aimed to push his vision of global governance and a reshaped world order. and he called for respect for international law and the global trade order. But critics say that China's actions, from militarizing the South China Sea to flooding markets with cheap products to covering up COVID-19, tell a very different story. Xi also announced 100 new projects across SCO countries. These new supplementary initiatives follow China's Belt and Road Initiative. Xi also unveiled plans to establish 10 new training centers over the next 5 years. These training centers are seen as successors to the Confucius Institute, which aims to export the CCP's soft power push through education. In addition, Xi announced roughly $280 million in grant aid to SCO member states by the end of the year, and India's Prime Minister Modi made his first visit to China in 7 years. During Modi's discussions with Xi Jinping, Xi downplayed the border tensions, and he called for a dragon-elephant dance, a dance that symbolizes harmony between China and India. In response, Modi agreed and said that the ties between the two countries shouldn't be influenced by any third party. The neighbors have long had historic border disputes, among other disputes, but now they have forged a closer relationship. 5 years ago, troops from the two countries had their first deadly military confrontation in decades over border disputes. Beyond border issues, the construction of a giant Chinese dam in Tibet is underway, but experts warn that the dam could cut water access for downstream nations like India. So, what's pushing Modi to get closer to China? Analysts say the reason could lie in the increasing U.S. pressure on India over its Russian oil purchases. On top of that, India faces 50% U.S. tariffs. In fact, President Trump announced yesterday that India would cut tariffs on U.S. goods to zero, but President Trump called it a long overdue move to fix one-sided trade. Now, let's go back to the Shanghai meeting, which is mainly led by China and Russia as an anti-West alliance. During the summit, there was a viral moment when Xi, Modi, and Putin were chatting and laughing together. Shortly after the three leaders spoke about NATO's expansion, Xi used his summit speech to criticize bullying in global affairs, and he urged the members of the SCO to stand against hegemonism, and he reaffirmed China's regional leadership. Xi also called for deeper cooperation on AI, and he invited countries to join China's International Lunar Research Station project. The summit wrapped up with the Tianjin Declaration Against Terrorism. Notably, the declaration didn't mention Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, so Ukrainian officials called it a diplomatic failure by Russia. After the summit, Putin will attend China's military parade tomorrow in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. According to South Korean media, North Korea's Kim Jong-un is already traveling by train from Pyongyang. Russian media reports that Kim and Putin will be seated on either side of Xi Jinping during the event. Over the weekend, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto canceled a planned visit to China to join other leaders. This was because protests that began recently in Indonesia's capital have spread to other provinces. On Saturday, a presidential spokesperson said that President Prabowo wanted to keep monitoring the situation directly and to work on the best solutions. The high salaries and benefits of Indonesian lawmakers have recently sparked large-scale anti-government protests, and the situation has resulted in the death of at least 5 people. To calm the situation, the Indonesian president announced on Sunday that political parties had agreed to revoke several benefits and privileges from lawmakers. Prabowo said that parliamentary leaders had agreed to revoke a series of parliamentary policies, including lawmakers' allowances, and suspend overseas trips. So, what was the main privilege? In September last year, the Indonesian parliament began granting each lawmaker a monthly housing allowance of 50 million rupiah, or $3,030. This is while the national average monthly income is only 3.1 million rupiah, or $202.60. So the policy fueled public anger. The protests broke out in the capital on August 25th, and they quickly spread to cities across the country. Party homes, council buildings, and government offices were looted or burned. Also, protests hit Indonesia's markets hard, sending stocks and currency down and shaking investor confidence. So, on Sunday, Prabowo urged Parliament to talk to community leaders, students, and civil groups in order to ensure public demand could be voiced peacefully. He also mentioned sanctions on lawmakers and called for joint efforts to maintain national security. He said that party leaders had agreed to internal disciplinary measures, including stripping some lawmakers of party membership. He also announced investigations into police officers who have recently violated the rules. He said that all the processes should be quick, transparent, and open to the public. But Prabowo also stressed that anarchic behavior, destruction of public property, and looting are unacceptable and could amount to terrorism and treason. The protests marked the first big challenge for Prabowo since taking power almost a year ago. President Trump held a press conference at the White House on August 22nd, announcing that the U.S. government would acquire a stake in Intel. Specifically, the government will use approximately $11.1 billion in subsidies to purchase 433.3 million primary shares of Intel common stock, becoming a shareholder holding about 9.9% of the company. The market reacted positively to this government initiative. Following the announcement, Intel's stock price rose by over 5%. However, some expressed concern that with the government acquiring stakes in private companies, the U.S. might begin adopting the Chinese Communist Party's approach of government control over enterprises and state subsidy systems. This follows President Trump's statement that the government will invest in more critical companies. Chris Ching, a visiting scholar at Columbia Business School, has long been engaged in comparative research on capital systems in China and the United States. He stated that such concerns are unnecessary. He published an article in the Epoch Times discussing the differences between Chinese Communist Party state-owned enterprises and U.S. government-invested enterprises. In the article, he pointed out that China's state-owned enterprises belong to the Chinese Communist Party government, which possesses the authority to direct and intervene in these enterprises. Resources for these enterprises are centrally allocated by the government. This represents a typical model of government-controlled market systems. He wrote, Trump's vision is entirely different. He speaks of the government existing as a shareholder, not meddling as a boss, but rather acting as a strategic investor. This system is known in the West as strategic capitalism. The Trump administration's investment is not for profit, but to safeguard critical national assets. This is especially true for industries like semiconductors that impact national security. This will prevent companies from slipping out of U.S. control due to market fluctuation or foreign acquisitions. The Trump administration's approach also aligns with economists' recommendations. In their book, Concrete Economics, economists Stephen Cohen and Brad DeLong note, under asymmetric competition and globalization, nations must selectively intervene in markets to prevent critical assets from being sacrificed by market mechanisms. So, what is asymmetric competition? The competition between Western companies and Chinese state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, is inherently unequal, both within China and on the global market. While most Western companies are privately owned, Chinese SOEs are backed by the entire Chinese Communist Party system, supported by the nation's resources and financial strength. This effectively means the entire country's resources are mobilized to compete against Western private enterprises. Western companies are clearly at an extreme disadvantage, so few refuse to yield under pressure from the Chinese Communist Party. In such circumstances, Western nations should not leave private enterprises to fight alone, but should provide support in some form. President Trump's move represents precisely this kind of limited, rational, and clearly targeted institutional intervention. The U.S. government does not participate in operations. It is more akin to the government holding an observer seat on the board rather than sitting in the driver's seat. In her book, The Entrepreneurial State, economic historian Mariano Mazzucato argues that many technological breakthroughs throughout history relied on early state investment or institutional safety nets. Governments do not replace businesses, rather they provide a safety net at critical junctures. This approach is not unprecedented in the United States. During the Cold War, the U.S. government supported key industries in defense, energy, and high-end manufacturing through investment. The Biden administration also recognized the importance of chip companies to national security. Its approach involved passing the CHIPS and Science Act, which provided hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies to the semiconductor industry. However, this approach carries certain drawbacks, such as high fiscal costs, complex regulatory processes, and a high risk of waste. Converting subsidies into equity is a relatively smart approach. By taking a direct stake, the government can receive returns when the company profits in the future. This eliminates the need for repeated subsidies. Moreover, as a shareholder, the government can counteract hostile overseas takeovers and gain greater transparency into the company's operations. Former U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster stated in The Economics of the National Security Frontier, "When threats shift from military to supply chains, nations require not merely rules, but defensive mechanisms within their capital structures. President Trump's shareholding plan is precisely an embodiment of this institutional defense. He is not interfering with the market, but rather giving the U.S. government a seat at the table. President Trump's recent use of tariff policies demands for corporate reshoring and encouragement for foreign companies to manufacture in the U.S. This has led many observers to exclaim, America appears to be embracing state capitalism, moving closer to the Chinese Communist Party model. China expert Wu Yijun also stated that when examining the institutional foundations, governance, logic, and international impact, the systems of the United States and the Chinese Communist Party are fundamentally different. The Trump administration's so-called state intervention actions primarily stem from national security and industrial competitiveness concerns, without undermining the market system under America's constitutional framework. The government must still operate within the checks and balances of separation of powers, judicial review, media oversight, and electoral turnover. President Trump's policies not only require congressional deliberation, but may also be amended or repealed due to constitutional challenges or intense public backlash. We've seen quite a few cases like this in recent months. Last week, the court even ruled that the Trump administration's tit-for-tat tariff policy was illegal. This stands in stark contrast to the situation under the Chinese Communist regime. China's industrial policies are dictated by the political will of the Chinese Communist Party, lacking transparent procedures and checks and balances. So if the U.S. government should exhibit tendencies towards so-called state capitalism at any point in the future, it would inevitably face oversight and constraint from democratic institutions, making such policies highly reversible. Now let's examine specific subsidy policies. Industrial subsidies and policy preferences in the United States are primarily targeted at addressing immediate challenges, such as managing trade deficits, resolving supply chain disruptions, or making strategic investments in semiconductors and new energy. These policies are clearly issue-driven and time-bound. So, if the broader environment should ever change, then the policies can be adjusted accordingly. However, the CCP subsidy policies are long-term, and they form part of its plan for global dominance. The government not only controls state-owned enterprises, but also demands that private companies like Alibaba, Didi, and Evergrande unconditionally comply with its directives. Additionally, the objectives of the two countries' subsidy policies differ fundamentally. The U.S. government's subsidies are driven by national security considerations aimed at strengthening America. Yet the overall economy continues to operate within the logic of preserving democratic institutions and free markets. In contrast, the Chinese Communist Party's subsidy policies serve two purposes. First, to consolidate the party's rule. Second, to spread communist ideology worldwide. This is the fundamental reason why the two cannot conflate. Chris Ching concludes, the Chinese model is state-controlled corporate destiny, while the Trump approach is state-set institutional coordinates. One is administration-led markets, the other is markets embedded in national strategy. This isn't a march towards state ownership, but a shift away from passive defense. It resembles a modern technological sovereignty buffer, Trump's strategic response to global tech competition amid the 21st century Cold War. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.